I gave my daughter-in-law everything she wanted for her baby shower. $35,000 from my retirement savings to make her dream party come true. I stood there watching her open the beautiful gifts I bought when she looked me straight in the eye and told me I was only there because I wouldn't stop asking to help. My son Tommy just smiled and nodded along. She thought she was embarrassing some silly old grandma. She had no idea she had just made an enemy of a retired tax inspector. Before we continue, first let me thank you for watching Granny's Voice. Please subscribe and tell us where you're watching from in the comments. We might give you a shout out in our next video. Today's special shout out goes to Renee Neal from Carbondale, Illinois. Thank you for being part of our family. Now, let me tell you everything. The morning sun was bright through my kitchen window. The only sounds were my coffee cup clinking and my heart beating fast. There on my wooden kitchen table sat my bank book, open to show the truth. $35,000 gone. It wasn't just money. It was 30 years of saving every penny. It was the new car I needed. It was the house repairs I'd been putting off. It was my safety net for when I got sick. I picked up my phone and called Tommy. He answered right away, sounding happy and excited. "Hi Mom, what's going on?" he asked. "Everything is wonderful, sweetie," I said, trying to sound happy when I felt worried inside. "I just wanted you to know the party place is all paid for. Everything is ready." There was quiet for a moment and I could hear his wife Lisa talking in the background. Then Tommy came back on the phone, but his voice sounded different. "That's great, Mom. Really great. Lisa and I are so thankful. You made this whole thing happen. It's all for your happiness, Tommy. That's what matters most to me," I told him, and I meant every word. But deep down, a small part of me wondered if he knew what this cost me. Not just the money, but all those nights I couldn't sleep worrying if I was doing the right thing. After we hung up, I stared at that bank book for a long time. My name was written on the front cover in blue ink. On the page inside, it showed how much money I had left. Almost nothing. The number was so small it made me feel scared. I took a deep breath and closed the book. My savings were gone. I felt empty and sad inside, but I pushed those feelings away. This was for my son. This was to make sure I would always be welcome in his family. The baby shower day came with lots of sunshine and pretty decorations. When I saw Tommy standing by the gift table in his nice shirt, my heart felt full of love. He looked just like his dad did when he was young. During the party, I sat at a small table near the kitchen, holding a tissue in my hand, and I let myself believe good things. I believed in the promises they were making. I believed we were becoming a real family. I believed my money was worth it. The party was held in a big room with fancy lights and tables covered with pink tablecloths. It looked like a fairy tale. When I walked in, I felt truly happy for the first time in weeks. I had done this. I had given them this perfect day. I looked around for where I was supposed to sit, thinking I would be near Tommy and Lisa. I saw the pretty name cards for Lisa's mom and dad, for her sister, for her best friend, but I couldn't find mine anywhere. A young woman with a clipboard saw me looking confused. "Can I help you find your seat?" she asked nicely. "Yes," I said, my smile getting smaller. "I'm Betty, Tommy's mother." She looked at her list, running her finger down the names. "Oh yes, here you are. You're at table 12, she said, pointing across the room. Table 12 was not up front. It was way in the back corner near the bathrooms. I felt sick to my stomach. My son was sitting up there at the main table, laughing with Lisa's dad, and he didn't even look for me. He didn't notice I was lost. Right before I started walking to that lonely table in the back. I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Please tell me in the comments. And please like this video and subscribe so you don't miss what happened next. I smoothed my dress, held my head up high, and started walking. Each step felt like it took forever. I could feel other people looking at me with sad eyes. I was the grandmother, the woman who paid for this whole party, and I was being sent to sit with people I barely knew. I sat down with my hands shaking in my lap. I watched as the family made their big entrance. I watched Tommy help Lisa cut the beautiful cake. They looked so happy together and everyone clapped. I clapped too, but it felt strange and far away. The food was served, drinks were poured, and people started giving speeches. Lisa's mom gave a long, sweet speech. Lisa's sister told a funny story. Lisa's best friend cried happy tears talking about their friendship. Then there was silence. I waited, thinking they would ask me to speak. I had spent days writing what I wanted to say, practicing in my mirror. But they never called my name. The music just got louder and my chance was gone. Later they announced it was time for special games. They called Lisa and her mom up front to play a guessing game about the baby. Everyone watched and laughed. I felt a tiny bit of hope. The grandmother game would be next. Tommy and I had talked about it. We were going to guess baby names together. But after Lisa's game ended, the party host's voice came through the speakers again. "All right, everyone. Time for the gift opening. Let's see what baby got." Happy music started playing. There was no grandmother game. There would be no special moment for Tommy and me. I sat there at my table in the corner and watched as my son was pulled toward the gift table by his wife. He didn't even look my way. As I watched him smile and laugh under those fancy lights, I realized something awful. They hadn't just forgotten to save me a good seat. They had forgotten about me completely. For the next hour, I sat at that table pretending everything was fine. I smiled at the strangers who tried to talk to me. I ate the dry chicken and drank the warm punch. I even tapped my foot to the music. I looked like a happy guest. But inside my head I was thinking hard. My brain, the one I had used for 25 years to catch people who lied about their taxes, was wide awake. The bad seat could have been a mistake. Forgetting to let me give a speech could have been an oversight. But the grandmother game we had planned, that was not an accident. That was done on purpose. I decided I had to talk to Tommy. Not to make a big scene but just to see his face, to hear what he would say. I needed to know the truth. I got up from my table and walked through all the people. The air smelled like flowers and perfume, but none of it made me happy anymore. I finally found him by the punch bowl talking to one of his old friends from work. For a second he looked like the little boy I raised, laughing without worry. I touched his arm gently. "Tommy," I said. He turned around and for just a moment his smile was real. "Mom, hi. Are you having fun?" "It's a beautiful party, honey," I said softly. I was wondering about that baby name game we talked about." His face changed. The real warmth disappeared, and he looked scared. He looked over his shoulder like he wanted to run away. "Oh, Mom. Gosh, I'm so sorry. The whole day just got crazy. Lisa had this whole plan with the party lady, and, He was just making excuses, and then the director of this whole show appeared next to him. Lisa walked up and put her arm through Tommy's, smiling as bright and hard as glass. "There you are, honey. We need to go thank my aunt before she leaves." She looked at me quickly. "Betty, you look so nice. I'm glad you're enjoying yourself." It was her way of telling me to go away, wrapped up in fake nice words. She didn't wait for me to say anything back. She just pulled Tommy away, and he went without looking back at me even once. I stood there alone in the middle of all those people. That's when I knew for sure this wasn't a bunch of mistakes. This was planned. I wasn't an honored guest. I was a problem they had to deal with. My eyes drifted to the huge pile of presents that sat on a special table under the lights. It was another thing I had paid for, one of the most expensive parts. I remembered talking with him about it, how Lisa had wanted specific expensive things from certain stores. I had said yes to everything, happy to give her whatever she dreamed of. A little while later, the host announced it was time to open presents. A crowd gathered around, and I moved to the edge, wanting to see their faces. Tommy and Lisa sat in matching chairs, smiling for all the cameras. They opened the first gift, a beautiful baby blanket. Then the photographer called Lisa's parents over. They all posed together, a happy family of 4, with their arms around each other, laughing as they looked at the presents. They never called for me. I, the woman who had bought half those gifts, was not asked to be in any pictures. I watched as they handed the biggest presents to Lisa's mom and dad to open. It was small, but the message was as clear as those bright lights above me. They were the family now. I was just the person who paid for things. I felt something big change inside me. The hurt was still there, deep and painful. But something else was growing. Cold, quiet anger. The kind that doesn't yell but watches everything. The kind that waits and remembers and writes things down. I was no longer a grandmother hoping for hugs. I was a tax inspector who had just found something very wrong with the numbers. The math didn't add up. The investment had not given me what I was promised. In fact, they had taken my investment and thrown me away like garbage. The party started ending. People began getting their coats and saying goodbye to Tommy and Lisa. I knew that if I left right then, the questions would eat at me forever. The pain would turn into bitterness I might never get rid of. I couldn't let that happen. My husband Jack always told me, "Betty, never make decisions when you don't know all the facts." And I didn't know all the facts yet. I had seen what they did, but I didn't understand why they did it. I saw Lisa standing by the present table, alone for a moment while Tommy talked with his friends. Her back was to me. She looked like a queen admiring her kingdom. My kingdom, the one my life savings had built for her. My heart was beating fast against my chest like a scared bird. But my feet were steady as I walked across the floor. This wasn't about making trouble. This was about finishing a job. I needed one last piece of information. I needed to look in her eyes and ask her the question that had been screaming in my head for the last 3 hours. I knew the answer might break my heart completely. But I also knew, deep in my bones, that I couldn't leave that room without asking. I took one last deep breath, walked right up to my daughter-in-law, and got ready to ask the question that would change everything. I reached her as she was looking at a silver picture frame someone had given them. She didn't turn when I got close, but I saw her eyes look at my reflection in the glass. She knew I was there. "Lisa," I said quietly, "could I talk to you for a minute, please?" She turned around slowly with a polite smile on her face. It didn't reach her eyes. Her eyes were cold like winter ice. "Betty, of course. Something wrong? You look upset." I put my hands together to keep them from shaking. "Had to know. I just wanted to ask if I did something to make you angry tonight. I feel like there's something wrong between us, and I want to fix it." Lisa's smile got bigger, but it was mean and sharp. She laughed a little, but it was the kind of laugh meant to make you feel stupid and small. She looked around the room at all the beautiful decorations, the shiny lights, the leftover cake I had paid for. "Honestly, Betty," she said, dropping her voice like she was telling me a secret, "you're only here because you insisted on being involved. Just try to enjoy the party you paid for." The words didn't make sense at first. They floated in the air between us like meaningless sounds mixed with the music. Then they hit me. One by one, each word was like being punched. "You're only here because you insisted." I couldn't breathe. I couldn't speak. I looked past her, desperately searching for my son. And I found him. Tommy was standing maybe 15 feet away by the punch table, talking to a friend. But he was looking right at us. He had been watching the whole time. He saw the look on my face. He had heard what she said. I know he did. Our eyes met across that crowded room. In that moment, I begged him with everything inside me. I begged him to walk over and defend me, to say, "Lisa, don't talk to my mother that way." To do anything to be the man I had raised him to be. Instead, I watched him break my heart into a million pieces. He gave a tiny shake of his head like he was saying, "Don't cause trouble." Then he looked down at his shoes, turned his back to me completely, and took a sip of his drink. He had chosen sides, and he had not chosen me. That was the real betrayal. That was the wound that would never heal. The $35,000 was just money. This was my son, my little boy. In that one moment, the fancy room, the sleepless nights I'd worried, the fragile hope I had held onto for months, it all turned to dust. The insult from Lisa was a slap across my face, but my son's silence was a knife in my heart. Before I tell you what I did next, because I promise you I didn't just stand there and take it, I want to thank you for being here with me. If you're feeling as angry about this as I was, please hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss how they learned exactly who they had messed with. Time seemed to slow down and speed up all at once. The people around me became blurry shapes and distant sounds. The music was just noise. All I could see was my son's back turned to me. All I could feel was the icy emptiness that had opened up inside me. I looked back at Lisa. Her mean smile was gone, replaced by a look that said she had won. She had gotten the money. She had gotten rid of me. She had what she wanted. Something inside me broke. Not in a loud, dramatic way. It was quiet and clean. The part of me that had been making excuses for them, the part that had hoped things would get better, it just died. The grandmother who was desperate to be part of her son's family was gone. In her place, someone else was waking up. Someone I hadn't been for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't give her anything. I just looked at her with a completely blank face. Then I turned around and walked away without saying another word. I walked past the table in the corner where my purse was. I walked past the present table, past the beautiful cake. I walked across the room with slow, steady steps. I didn't say goodbye to anyone. I didn't look back to see if Tommy had finally turned around. I just kept walking through the big lobby, past the smiling workers, and out into the cool night air. I got in my car and the engine started with its familiar sound. I drove home in complete silence. The tears wouldn't come. All I could think about was one single thought forming in my mind like a storm cloud. Question. A professional curiosity from my old job. It was time to check the receipts. When I closed my front door behind me, the quiet in my house felt like a heavy blanket. It wrapped around me, so different from all the noise and fake happiness I had just escaped. For a moment, I just stood there in my hallway with my purse still in my hand, listening to the old clock on my wall tick. It was the same clock that had counted the hours of my whole life in this home. It had ticked through my husband's sickness, through Tommy's growing up, through countless nights of worry and joy. Tonight, it seemed to be counting down the seconds of my new, lonely reality. I walked into my living room, the room where Tommy had taken his first steps. My hand went automatically to a framed picture on the shelf. It was Tommy at age 5, grinning with missing front teeth, holding up a drawing he had made for me. The words, "Best Grandma," were written in messy red crayon at the top. I touched the glass over his smiling face. Where did that sweet little boy go? When did his heart become a place where I wasn't welcome anymore? The pain wasn't a flood of tears. It was a heavy weight in my chest, a coldness that spread through my whole body. I felt so tired it went all the way to my bones. I had spent so much of my life making sure he was happy, protecting him, providing for him. I had given him the last of my financial security, money that Jack and I had saved together, dollar by dollar. And for what? To be told I was unwanted at my own grandson's party. To watch him stand by and let it happen. I sank into Jack's old recliner, the worn fabric sighing under my weight. I closed my eyes and for a long time, I just let the pain wash over me. The shame, the disrespect, the complete loneliness of it all. It felt like an ending, like closing a door that could never be opened again. But then something else started to surface. It began as a small, insistent thought, a tiny light in the overwhelming darkness of my sadness. It was a voice I hadn't heard in years. It was the voice of who I used to be before I was a widow, before I was just Tommy's mom. It was the voice of Betty, the tax inspector. That voice wasn't emotional. It was logical. It didn't talk about heartbreak. Talked about patterns. It whispered that the cruel treatment I had experienced wasn't just random meanness. Such boldness, such complete dismissal doesn't come from nowhere. Comes from feeling powerful. It was the boldness of someone who thinks they have already won, that the game is over and they hold all the winning cards. Why was Lisa so confident? Why wasn't she afraid to insult me? Because she thought I was powerless. She thought I was just a sad, sentimental old woman whose job was done. The bank was closed. The transaction was complete. I sat up straight in the chair. My eyes opened. The sadness was still there, thick like fog in the room. But my mind was suddenly, shockingly clear. I had been looking at this all wrong. I had been thinking like a grandmother. I needed to start thinking like a tax inspector. A tax inspector who suspected someone was hiding income and lying about their numbers. This wasn't a family argument. This was a business deal gone wrong. And I, the primary investor, had just been kicked out of the company I had funded. The coldness inside me started to change. It was no longer the coldness of sadness. It was the coldness of professional focus. The kind of focus I used to have when I knew, just knew, that someone's tax return was full of lies. I stood up from the recliner. My movements were no longer tired. They were purposeful. I walked out of the living room down the hall, to a door that had stayed closed for almost 3 years. My home office. The air inside was stale, and dust covered my old desk and the dark computer monitor. This room was like a museum of my former life, a life of logic, of facts, of numbers that had to balance perfectly. I turned on the desk lamp, and warm yellow light cut through the darkness. It felt like waking up a part of my brain that had been asleep too long. I went to the gray filing cabinet in the corner. My fingers, steady now, went straight to the second drawer. I pulled it open and started looking through the files, past house bills, past Jack's medical records, until my hand stopped on a fresh manila folder. The label in my own neat handwriting read, Tommy's baby shower expenses. I pulled the folder out and carried it back to the desk. Opened it up. Inside was a neat stack of papers. The party venue contract, the catering bill, the receipts for decorations, music, and photography. Every single receipt for the $35,000 dream I had just paid for. My complete case file. I sat down in my old office chair with the folder spread out in front of me. The grandmother in me was mourning a loss so deep I couldn't even name it. But the tax inspector in me had just taken on a new case, and I never ever closed a case until every number was accounted for. The first morning light was starting to come through the window blinds, making long shadows across the room. I hadn't slept. I hadn't even felt tired. The sadness and shame from last night had been burned away by the cold, clean fire of purpose. My desk, once a dusty reminder of my past, was now an active investigation scene. I worked carefully the way I had for 25 years. Confusion is the enemy of truth. My first step was to create order. I took the thick stack of papers from the baby shower folder and sorted them into neat piles. Contracts, first quotes, final bills, and proof of payment. My canceled checks and credit card statements. I turned on my old desktop computer. It came to life with a slow grinding sound, a machine waking from a long sleep. I opened a spreadsheet program, its familiar grid of empty boxes a comforting sight. I started with the simple vendors. The decorator, the photographer, the musician who played during the gift opening. One by one, I typed their first quotes into one column and their final bills into another. I checked them against my bank statements. Everything matched perfectly. These were honest business people. They gave clear, detailed bills and charged exactly what they said they would. This part of my investigation was clean. I knew it would be. It was just the warm-up work, clearing away the simple stuff so I could get a good look at the real problem. Then I came to the last and biggest stack of papers, the ones from the party planner. Dreams come true events. The company had been Lisa's absolute must-have. She had insisted they were the best, a personal recommendation from her college friend, and that using anyone else would ruin everything. I remembered how she had refused my suggestion to get other quotes, saying it would be insulting to her friend. I had given in another small battle I had lost for the sake of peace that I now knew was completely fake. I picked up the final bill, a 3-page document totaling just over $22,000. My eyes, trained by decades of experience, immediately saw the red flags. The descriptions were unclear. Premium party coordination, luxury event styling, exclusive celebration management. There was no breakdown of costs, no detailed list of what was actually provided. It was the kind of bill designed to hide things, not explain them. It was the work of someone inexperienced or someone trying to steal. I pulled out the original estimate from my files. I had insisted on getting one in writing before agreeing to anything. A small act of smart business I had not forgotten. I laid the two documents side by side under the lamplight. The difference was shocking. The estimate was clear and detailed, showing the cost per service, specific decoration choices, staffing costs. It all added up to a total of $7,500. $7,500, not $22,000. My breath caught in my throat. It was a $14,500 difference. A number so big, so outrageous, it couldn't possibly be a mistake. This wasn't an error. This was theft. My heart started beating faster, not with fear, but with the familiar excitement of the hunt. My mind was racing, connecting the pieces. Lisa's insistence on this company, the vague final bill, the ridiculous total. This was it. This was why she had been so bold at the party. She wasn't just a mean daughter-in-law. She was part of the scheme. But I needed more. A suspicion, even a strong one, wasn't proof. I needed something undeniable. I looked at the bill again, my eyes going over every line, every number. And then I saw it. Hidden at the bottom of the last page was a charge for custom ice sculpture and specialty lighting. $3,000. I knew for certain there had been no ice sculpture at the party. It was something Lisa had wanted, but I had said it was too expensive, and we had all agreed to skip it. They hadn't just inflated the prices. They had billed me for things that never existed. I leaned back in my chair as the pieces of the puzzle clicked together with terrifying, satisfying clarity. I opened a web browser on my slow computer and typed the event planning company's name. The business records were public. Dreams Come True Events, established just 6 months ago. The owner was listed as Sarah Chen, Lisa's college roommate, just like she had said. The final piece was a quick search of Lisa's social media. There, on a post from 8 months ago, was a photo of her with a caption celebrating, "My amazing friend Sarah's new event planning business. Can't wait to work together." Can't wait indeed. Her baby shower was probably the company's first and maybe only real customer. It wasn't a friend's recommendation. It was a setup, a carefully planned scheme to take as much money from me as possible. They had used her pregnancy and my love for my son as a way to commit robbery. I printed the business registration and the social media post. I placed them on the desk next to the original estimate and the fake final bill. All the evidence laid out in a neat, undeniable row. And there it was. $14,500. The difference between what I agreed to pay and what they had stolen from me. It wasn't overcharging. It was simple, clean theft. And I had the paperwork to prove it. I slept for 4 hours that morning. It was deep, dreamless sleep, the kind that comes only after a storm has passed and a choice has been made. When I woke up, the sun was high in the sky. The lingering pain in my heart had been replaced by a quiet, steady hum of energy. I made a pot of strong black coffee and went right back to my office. The evidence was spread out on my desk, silent proof of the lies that had been told. But evidence is just raw information. It needed to be organized. It needed to be turned into a weapon. My first thought was to call Tommy and confront him, to scream, to cry, to demand he explain himself. But I shut that thought down immediately. That was what the old Betty would have done. The grandmother. They were ready for the grandmother. They expected tears, emotional begging, a messy, dramatic scene they could easily dismiss as the ravings of a hysterical, heartbroken old woman. They would not be ready for the tax inspector. So I spent the day building my case. I knew from my professional life that one piece of evidence can be argued with. A mountain of it cannot. I needed to build a mountain. I started by calling 3 of the most respected, high-end event planners in the city. I put on a cheerful, excited voice, pretending to be a woman planning a big retirement party for her husband. I gave them the exact guest count from the baby shower and read them the exact services from the original estimate provided by Lisa's friend. I asked for detailed quotes to be emailed to me. Within hours, all 3 quotes were in my inbox. They were professional, thorough, and almost identical in price. All 3 came in around $8,000. This was invaluable. It was independent, third-party proof of the market value of what I had received. It proved that Lisa's friend wasn't just expensive. She was a fraud. Next, I turned my attention to writing the report. I opened a new document and typed a title: Financial Investigation and Fraud Report. Below that, a subject line: Services contracted for baby shower event. It was cold, official, and completely without emotion. This was not a letter from a hurt grandmother. This was a professional investigation. I wrote a 2-page summary that detailed the total amount I had paid: $35,000. I then created a clear, precise spreadsheet. It listed every legitimate vendor, every verified expense, the venue, the decorations, the music. Then I listed the event planner. In the column for agreed price, I entered the $7,500 from the original estimate. In the column for amount billed, I entered the $22,000. And in the final column labeled discrepancy, I entered the difference in bold red numbers: $14,500. The numbers told the story far better than any emotional words ever could. The final step was to put together the appendix. This was the proof, the mountain of evidence that would make my claim impossible to deny. I scanned each document carefully. Exhibit A: the original signed estimate from Dreams Come True events for $7,500. Exhibit B: the final inflated bill for $22,000, and I used a red pen to circle the fraudulent $3,000 charge for the non-existent ice sculpture. Exhibit C, D, and E: the 3 official quotes from other event planning companies, proving the market rate. Exhibit F: the public business registration for Lisa's friend's company, showing it was created just months before the baby shower. I put everything together into one professional PDF file. Perfect airtight case. It was the kind of file I used to hand over to lawyers and government officials. A file that left no room for argument, no space for discussion. Simply stated the facts. I sat there for a long time, staring at the completed file on my computer screen. It was a declaration of war, and I knew it. There was no going back from this. The broken, fragile relationship I had with my son would likely be destroyed forever. But what was I trying to save? A relationship where I was seen as nothing more than a wallet. A family where I was an unwelcome burden. No, that wasn't a family. That was a con game, and it was time to shut down their operation. I opened my email program. I typed in the email addresses for both Tommy and Lisa. For the subject line I wrote, Urgent Investigation Results. Event Planning Fraud. I didn't write a long, angry message. I wrote one simple professional sentence. Please review the attached investigation report documenting significant fraud in the baby shower event planning services. The PDF file was attached. Their names were in the recipient line. Everything I had worked on for the past day, every bit of pain and determination, came down to this single click. Before I hit send and changed their world forever, I want to ask you something. Have you ever had a moment where you knew you had to stand up for yourself no matter what it cost? Let me know with a simple yes or no in the comments below. And if you're supporting me right now, please consider subscribing. You won't want to miss how they reacted. My finger hovered over the mouse for just a second. Then I clicked. A small message popped up on my screen. Your message has been sent. I closed my laptop and turned in my chair to look out the window at the quiet neighborhood street. The sun was starting to set, painting the sky orange and purple. The ball was no longer in my court. It was flying directly toward theirs, and I knew with absolute certainty they had no idea how to handle it. I did not wait by the computer. I did not stare at my phone nervously waiting for their response. I had planted the seed, and I knew it would grow in its own time. Instead, I went to the kitchen and put the kettle on to make some herbal tea. While the water heated, I walked into my living room and started to slowly clean up, fluffing the cushions on the couch, straightening the stack of books on the side table. It was a simple calming ritual. I was reclaiming my space, my peace, my home. My phone, which I had left on the kitchen counter, buzzed. I didn't move toward it. Few seconds later, it buzzed again. I continued organizing the magazines on my coffee table, letting the quiet of the house settle around me again. Only when the kettle started whistling did I walk back to the kitchen. I poured the hot water over the tea bag in my favorite mug, the one Jack had given me on our last Christmas together. Then, and only then, did I pick up my phone. There were 3 text messages, all from Tommy. The first one read, "Mom, what is this report?" The second, sent 2 minutes later, was more panicked. "This is crazy. You need to call me right now." The third was just sent, "Please don't do anything else until we talk." I read the messages, took a slow, calming sip of my tea, and placed the phone face down on the counter. I was not going to call him. An emotional, panicked phone call was exactly what they wanted. It was a battlefield of their choosing, one where they could yell, manipulate, and cry. My battlefield was different. It was quiet. It was logical, and it was built on a foundation of cold, hard evidence. I would wait. Not 3 minutes later, my phone started ringing. The screen lit up with Tommy's name and picture. I watched it ring, the sound loud and jarring in the quiet kitchen. I let it go to voicemail. He called back immediately. I let it ring again. The third time he called, I turned the sound off completely. A new text message appeared. This one from Lisa. Her tone was not panicked. It was angry. "I don't know what sick game you're playing, Betty, but you need to stop. My friend Sarah is a respected businesswoman, and these are baseless, insane accusations. You need to call us and take back that email immediately." I almost smiled. Baseless accusations. The irony was almost too much. I had attached a 7-page report with detailed, verifiable proof. She wasn't arguing the facts. She was attacking the person who had presented them. It was a classic and very weak strategy. The next hour was a symphony of their desperation, a flood of missed calls from both of them, a series of voicemails, each one more unhinged than the last. I listened to them later out of professional curiosity. Tommy's were a mess of pleading and confusion. "Mom, please. I don't understand. You've got this all wrong. Just talk to me. We can fix this." He sounded like a scared little boy. Lisa's voicemails were pure poisonous rage. "How dare you? After everything we did to include you in our special day, you're trying to ruin our lives before they even begin. My friend Sarah is going to sue you for slander. Betty, you have made a very, very big mistake." I continued with my evening. I went out to my backyard and watered the vegetable garden Jack had planted for me years ago. The sun was warm on my face, and the smell of the tomatoes was fresh and clean. Their chaos felt like it was happening in another world. I was not part of it. I was the cause of it, but I was not participating. I was simply watching the predictable result of a controlled experiment. I had introduced a catalyst, the truth, into an unstable system built on lies. An explosion was the only possible outcome. I felt a grim sense of satisfaction. Not joy, not happiness, but the quiet, deep satisfaction that comes from seeing a complex problem solved by simple, undeniable logic. They had thought I was an emotional creature, that I ran on sentiment and obligation. They had no idea that my entire professional life was built on the principle that numbers don't lie, and feelings don't matter when you're balancing the books. As the evening went on, the frantic calls and angry texts slowed, then stopped. There was a long period of silence. I knew what this meant. Their first strategy had failed. The shock and awe, the emotional blackmail, the threats, none of it had worked. They were regrouping. They were realizing that they were not dealing with the woman they thought they knew. Then a final text message came through. It was from Tommy. The tone was different. The panic and anger were gone, replaced by a strained, formal resignation. "We can't discuss this over the phone," it read. "We're coming over. We'll be there in 30 minutes. I read the message, and a strange sense of calm settled over me. This was it. This was the moment the case would be brought to trial. I sent my first and only reply of the entire evening. A single word. "Fine." I put my phone down, the screen going dark. The panic was over. The pleading had failed. Now came the confrontation. I rinsed out my tea mug, walked to the dining room, and turned on the overhead light. Then I went to my office to get the folder. It was time to set up the courtroom. I didn't have to wait long. Exactly 30 minutes after the final text, headlights swept across my living room window. I heard 2 car doors slam shut harder than necessary. The doorbell rang, a single sharp impatient buzz. I took a final steadying breath. I was not nervous. I was ready. I walked to the front door and opened it. They stood on my front porch, silhouetted against the streetlights. Lisa was in front, her face a mask of righteous fury, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Tommy stood just behind her, his shoulders hunched, his face pale and tired. He wouldn't look me in the eyes. "Betty," Lisa began, her voice dripping with venom before she had even stepped inside. "We need to talk." "I agree," I said calmly, stepping back to let them in. "The dining room is this way." I didn't lead them to the comfortable chairs in the living room. This was not a family discussion. This was a business meeting. I walked to the dining room and took my seat at the head of the table. The heavy wood felt solid and grounding under my hands. The file lay closed in front of me. They followed me in, but they didn't sit down. They stood there, looming over the table, a united front of accusation. Lisa started immediately, her voice getting louder with every word. "I cannot believe you. How could you do this to us? To your own son? You're trying to destroy our family with these disgusting lies. After we went out of our way to include you in our baby shower, this is how you thank us, by trying to blackmail us." Tommy shifted uncomfortably, finally looking at me, his eyes pleading. "Mom, please. This is all just a huge misunderstanding. Lisa's friend Sarah would never. Or family. Can't we just work this out? Why are you being like this?" I remained silent. I had made a promise to myself that I would not speak until they had fired every emotional bullet they had. I let Lisa's accusations wash over me. I listened to Tommy's weak, guilt-ridden appeals. I let their words fill the room like a storm of sound and fury, and I simply sat there, my hands resting calmly on the table, my face unreadable. My silence unnerved them. It wasn't the reaction they had prepared for. They expected tears. They expected screaming. They expected a fight. I gave them nothing. When Lisa finally ran out of accusations, her chest heaving with exhaustion, a tense, heavy silence fell over the room. They had said their piece. Now it was my turn. I looked at them, my gaze moving from Lisa's furious face to my son's desperate one. Then I gestured to the two empty chairs across from me. "Sit down," I said. My voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of a command, not a request. Hesitantly they sat down. They looked like students being called into the principal's office. The power dynamic in the room had already shifted, and they knew it. I placed my hand on the manila folder. I didn't open it yet. "I have listened to what you both have to say," I began, my voice even and clear. "You have talked about family and feelings and misunderstandings. I am not here to discuss any of those things. This is a financial investigation." I looked directly at Lisa. "You called my report a lie. Let's examine one fact. Exhibit B in this file is the final bill from your friend's company. It includes a $3,000 charge for a custom ice sculpture and specialty lighting. You and I both know there was no ice sculpture at the baby shower. Would you like to call that a lie, or would you prefer the term theft?" Lisa's mouth opened, then closed. The color drained from her face. She had no answer. I then turned to my son. "Tommy, you called this a misunderstanding. This file contains a signed estimate for event planning services totaling $7,500. It also contains the final bill for $22,000. That is a $14,500 difference. As your mother, I find that heartbreaking. But as a tax inspector, I find it to be felony fraud." I let the words hang in the air, heavy and undeniable. I could see the fight completely drain out of them. They were beaten. So I continued, my voice still calm, still measured. "Here is what is going to happen. This is not a negotiation. You will repay the $14,500 that you and your accomplice stole from me, or this entire file." I tapped the folder with my finger. "A copy of which is already scanned, saved, and addressed, will be hand-delivered to the district attorney's office tomorrow morning. I will also be forwarding it to the IRS. I imagine they will be very interested in your friend Sarah's unreported business income." I let the words hang in the silence of the room. The choice was theirs, but for the first time in a very long time I was the one setting the terms. And if you believe that every person deserves to set their own terms and be treated with respect, please help this community grow stronger by hitting that subscribe button. Your support means more than you know. Lisa stared at me, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and hatred. I could see her mind racing, searching for an angle, a threat, a way out. But there wasn't one. I had built a perfect, inescapable trap made of nothing but the truth. Tommy put his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking slightly. The shame was finally, completely washing over him. The game was over. They had played and they had lost. Lisa shot a furious glare at Tommy, then looked back at me, her lip curling into a sneer. You would do that to your own son. I met her gaze without flinching. I would do this to anyone who stole from me, I said quietly. The fact that it was my own son is just the tragedy of it. That was it, the final blow. There was nothing left to say. The power they had held over me, the power of guilt and obligation, was gone. All that remained was the quiet authority of the facts. Tommy finally lifted his head. His eyes were red-rimmed. He looked at Lisa, then at the folder on the table, and then finally at me. The fight was gone. All that remained was the crushing weight of his own failure. Okay, Mom, he said, his voice broken. Okay. We'll get you the money. After Tommy spoke those words of surrender, there was nothing left to say. They didn't stay long. Lisa stood up stiffly, her face pale and her eyes filled with a cold, hard hatred that I knew would never fade. She walked out of my dining room without another word, without a single glance at her husband. Tommy remained seated for a moment longer, his head in his hands. He looked up at me, his eyes searching for something, a flicker of the mother he knew, a hint of softness. I offered him none. I just looked back, my expression calm and steady. He flinched as if my silence was a physical blow. Then he pushed himself up from the table and followed his wife out the door. I listened to their footsteps retreat down the hall. I heard the front door open and then close with a soft, final click. I listened as their car started, the engine roaring to life before speeding away from the curb with a squeal of tires, a single childish act of defiance in the face of their total defeat. And then there was silence. The quiet in the house was different now. It was no longer the heavy, lonely silence of grief. It was the clean, peaceful silence of resolution. A file had been closed. A debt had been acknowledged. I walked over to the dining room table, picked up the manila folder, and carried it back to my office. I placed it back in the filing cabinet, not as a weapon held in reserve, but as a closed case, a matter of historical record. The storm was over. 10 days passed. 10 days of absolute, uninterrupted silence. No calls, no texts, no unexpected visits. It was as if a noisy, broken appliance in my home had finally been unplugged. I found myself breathing more easily. I slept through the night for the first time in months. I spent time in my garden. I read 4 books. I called old friends I hadn't talked to in years. I was rediscovering the quiet, simple rhythm of my own life. A life that was not dependent on my son's happiness or his wife's approval. Then one morning I was checking my bank account online, and there it was. A wire transfer deposited the day before. The amount was exactly $14,500. No message, no note of apology, just the cold, hard number. Seeing it there didn't bring me joy. It brought me a sense of order, the quiet satisfaction of an equation that had finally been balanced. The books were straight. The consequences for them, I learned, were not so quiet. I received a call a few days later from my neighbor Mrs. Patterson, who had been at the baby shower. After some polite small talk, she got to the real reason for her call. "It's the strangest thing, Betty," she said, her voice full of curiosity. "I was just talking to Tommy's wife at the grocery store, and she mentioned that they had to cancel their big baby moon trip to Hawaii. Can you believe it? She said there was some kind of financial emergency. I do hope everything is all right." "I'm sure they'll manage," I said, my voice perfectly neutral. "These things happen." Another piece of the puzzle fell into place a week after that. I was driving past the new subdivision where Lisa had excitedly shown me pictures of the house they were planning to buy. I saw the model home they had toured, and on the lawn was a large, still available sign where there had once been a sold banner. Their dream house was back on the market. Tommy finally called me about 6 weeks after the confrontation. The rage and panic were gone, replaced by a strained, hollow tone I barely recognized. He didn't apologize. He didn't even mention the money. He just made awkward conversation, asking about my garden, telling me about his job. It was a pathetic attempt to pretend that nothing had changed. Then he tried to ask for advice about a medical bill they couldn't afford. "That sounds like a difficult situation, Tommy," I said, my voice polite but distant. "I'm sure you and Lisa will figure something out." I did not offer to help. I did not offer money. I did not offer a solution. I offered him nothing but the cool, detached sympathy you might give a stranger. The silence on his end of the line was heavy. I had drawn a new boundary, and for the first time he had just run right into it. He mumbled a goodbye and hung up. I knew without having to see it that their perfect life, the one built on my money and their lies, was falling apart. The high-interest loan they must have taken out to repay me would be a constant burden. The cancelled baby moon and the lost house were just the beginning. Their relationship was not founded on love and trust, but on a shared act of theft, and now they were chained together by debt and the resentment of being caught. They had gotten exactly what they deserved, and now they had to live with it. That evening I sat at my computer and looked at my bank account again. The $14,500 sat there, a symbol of my reclaimed dignity. It was no longer the nest egg I had saved for emergencies. It was no longer the gift I had given out of love. It was just money. My money. And I finally knew exactly what I was going to do with it. I opened a new browser window and searched for Senior Travel Group's Hawaii. The money was back where it belonged, but it wasn't going to sit in an account as a security blanket anymore. It was going to be a ticket. My ticket to the life I wanted to live. The first time I truly felt free was sitting on a beach in Maui, watching the sunset paint the ocean in shades of gold and pink. The warm sand was soft between my toes, and the sound of the waves was like music. I was completely alone, a stranger in a beautiful place, thousands of miles from the quiet, predictable life I had always known. And I had never felt more at home. My trip to Hawaii was more than just a vacation. It was a rebirth. I wasn't just visiting beaches and volcanoes. I was visiting a version of myself I had forgotten existed. The adventurous woman who had dreamed of seeing the world. The woman who loved nature and freedom and the simple joy of watching a sunrise with no schedule to keep. I hiked for miles every day with no plan and no one to answer to. I ate fresh pineapple for breakfast. I learned to snorkel in crystal clear water. And I had long, wonderful conversations with other travelers from around the world. For the first time in decades, my identity was not tied to being a wife, a mother, or a source of money. I was just Betty, a woman discovering that her own company could be more fulfilling than the company of those who took her for granted. When I returned home 2 weeks later, the house felt different. It was no longer a place of heavy memories and silent sadness. It was my sanctuary, my castle. I saw it with new eyes, not as the place where my family had broken apart, but as the place where I had put myself back together. The quiet that had once felt like loneliness now felt like peace. I started to fill that peace with things that brought me genuine happiness. I joined the local hiking club and spent my weekends exploring trails with people who appreciated nature. I took the investigative skills I had used to save myself and put them to better use, volunteering twice a week to help a local senior center organize their finances and protect them from scams. My generosity had not disappeared. It had simply been redirected. I now gave my time and energy to people who were grateful, to causes that mattered, to a community that valued me. My relationship with Tommy, if you could still call it that, became one of polite, formal distance. He calls every few months. The conversations are brief and superficial. He asks about the weather. Ask about work. He never mentions Lisa or the baby. I never ask. He has never offered a true apology, and I no longer need one. The son I mourned was the little boy in the photograph, the one with the missing teeth and the crayon drawing. The man he became is a stranger to me now, and I have made my peace with that. Their life, from what I hear through the neighborhood gossip, is a quiet, stressful struggle, a business partnership weighed down by debt they are still working to pay off. It is the natural consequence of the choices they made. I harbor no ill will toward them. I simply do not think of them at all. Sometimes when I am sitting in my garden watching the stars come out, I think about the journey. The pain I felt that night at the baby shower was the deepest of my life. The betrayal cut me to my core. But now I see it for what it was. A forest fire, a destructive, terrible event that burned everything to the ground, but it cleared the way for new growth. It forced me to rebuild myself on a stronger foundation. I had to lose the family I thought I wanted to finally become the woman I was always meant to be. Today my home is quiet. My mind is clear, and my peace is my greatest treasure. I learned that my value is not determined by what I can give to others, but by the respect I demand for myself. Every subscription to this channel is a vote of support for people like us to find our own voice. Please help this community grow so we can all share our stories and become stronger together. The greatest lesson in all of this is that the most important investigation you can ever conduct is into your own life. You have to check the receipts. You have to balance the books. You have to see who is making deposits of love and respect and who is only ever making withdrawals. And you have the right to close any account that is draining your soul. It's never too late to demand respect. And never forget that true family doesn't use you. It cherishes you.